bless all members of Congress with wisdom. Give them the courage to honor the Constitution as they have promised to do, so that all Americans can proudly observe their government in action. Opinion and feelings will be on edge. May all members be filled by your Holy Spirit and engage each other with goodwill and respect. May all that is done this day and in the days to come be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House her approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved.
Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, I demand a vote on the Speaker's approval of the journal.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present, and I make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from California, Mr. Liu.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, today on Martin Luther King's birthday, I rise to recognize a Buffalo, New York resident born the same year as Dr. King, who continues to serve as a local church, community, and business leader, my good friend Clifford Bell. Brother Bell, as he is known in Western New York for the love he brings to all those around him, has served as a senior business advisor to Buffalo State's Small Business Development Center. He was a colleague of mine on the Buffalo City Council, and he has led the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration in Buffalo for 3 decades. As a council member, Brother Bell is known for the line, "For whom the bells toll, this bell tolls for you," a quote that historically references the interconnectedness of humanity and his commitment to service. Dr. Martin Luther King, in his "Where Do We Go From Here" address, said, "Hate is too great a burden to bear. I have decided to love." Brother Bell has lived a life of love representing the best of our community and our country. We as a nation can learn from his example. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Madam Speaker, I move unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Congratulations to General John W. J. Raymond, who was sworn in as the first Chief of Space Operations for the newly established U.S. Space Force yesterday. As a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, I am grateful to President Donald Trump for General Raymond's confirmation and for being able to attend the National Defense Authorization Act signing, which officially established the U.S. Space Force. General Raymond is a Clemson University alumnus and has over 30 years of military experience. This establishment is absolutely critical to national security, he said during his remarks after being sworn in. I am grateful that the U.S. Space Force is in strong, capable hands. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th, defeating terrorists overseas in the global war on terrorism with the courageous leadership of President Donald Trump.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise?
To address the House and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to take a moment to honor an outstanding organization, Alpha Kappa Alpha. This is their Founders Day, 112 years old. Isn't it interesting that young women who were in the shadow of the Emancipation Proclamation, the shadow of slavery, in the midst of Jim Crowism, and on the precipice of World War I, organized at Howard University to be able to give African American women a place for leadership, civic mindedness. And as we are on the precipice of a great historic moment dealing with protecting the Constitution here in the United States Congress and the United States Senate, I'm glad to honor these women that included Ethel Hedgeman, Margaret Flagg Holmes, Marjorie Hill, Lily Burke, Beulah Elizabeth Burke, Anna Easter Brown, and many other young women who decided to take a stand for what is right in this nation and the opportunities of diversity and leadership. Congratulations to our national president, Dr. Glover, and congratulations to all of our Alpha Kappa Alpha members throughout the United States of America. Happy Founders Day 112. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After a long, embarrassing month, the House will finally transmit the articles of impeachment against President Trump to the United States Senate. Yet I understand Speaker Pelosi and her managers will continue to push for witnesses in the Senate trial because, in their words, they want the facts. That claim is nonsense. House Democrats blocked the testimony of the whistleblower, DNC staffer Alexandra Chalupa, Nellie Orr with Fusion GPS, and of course, the two gentlemen pictured to my left, Devin Archer and Hunter Biden. In reality, Democrats' entire case depended upon hiding the facts. As more facts emerged last year, their case collapsed. Public support for impeachment fell as the weakness of their case was exposed. I remind my friends in the majority, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I predict House Democrats will not fare as well blocking these witnesses in the United States Senate, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise.
Without objection, the gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, the House released additional documents and new text messages from Lev Parnas. He is an associate of Donald Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. He's also been indicted. And these documents and text messages show a chilling picture of surveillance, both physical and electronic, of the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. This is all the more reason why we need to have a full and fair trial in the United States Senate. The House today is going to transmit the articles of impeachment to the Senate. Donald Trump was impeached for abusing his power, for soliciting interference in our elections from a foreign government. He will be branded for the rest of his life. It is permanent. It will not go away. And now we need the Senate to act and have a fair trial. And that means witnesses and documents. If they do not do that, it will be the equivalent of a cover-up. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize an outstanding member of my staff who is moving on to a career in the defense sector, Danielle Hauser. Danielle graduated from UF in 2015 with a degree in International and Global Studies and then moved to D.C. to begin her career on Capitol Hill. In January of 17, she helped open our office as my executive assistant, later moving into a legislative role and becoming my legislative aide for military and defense affairs. After Hurricane Michael devastated the Panhandle, DJ played a key role in ensuring Tyndall Air Force Base and all of our bases had the resources they needed for recovery. DJ is a force of nature. She's ambitious, disciplined, hardworking, and cheerful, a joy to be with. She's been an integral part of my office since its inception, and we will miss her greatly. Madam Speaker, please join me in recognizing Danielle Hauser for all that she has done for North Florida and our nation, and wish her luck in her future endeavors. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This weekend, I will join hundreds of activists and supporters for the Women's March in Seneca Falls, New York, home of the historic 1848 Women's Rights Convention that sparked the suffrage movement. We will celebrate the incredible strides we have made in the fight for women's rights and the many strong, courageous women who have shattered glass ceilings to achieve progress. The year 2020 marks the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, guaranteeing and protecting women's constitutional right to vote. Now more than ever, as we face new barriers threatening to roll back the rights of women, we must take up the mantle of Susan B. Anthony and the suffragists who came before us to continue to fight for full equality that all women deserve. Together, we will keep persisting. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise the agenda.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Richard N. Riley on a well-deserved retirement after many years of service to the United States of America. Rich has been a United States Department Pearson Fellow in my Washington, D.C. office over this past year and has provided invaluable guidance and assistance to both my staff and my constituents. A native of Minnesota, Rich began his service to our nation as an Army infantryman, and then he continued on later with a 20-year career as a naval officer. Following his time in the military, Rich joined the State Department of Foreign Service officer, advocating for America's interests abroad. On behalf of the 4th District of Florida and a grateful nation, I offer my heartfelt thanks to Rich for his many contributions to our country and wish him a relaxing and fulfilling retirement, enjoyed with his wife Susan, his children, and their new granddaughter Peyton. Congratulations, Rich.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I speak today for Raif Badawi, a Saudi Arabian human rights blogger unjustly imprisoned since 2012 for exercising his right to freedom of expression. His supposed crime, criticizing Islam and the religious police. His sentence, 10 years in prison, 1,000 lashes, and a huge fine. Monday, January 13th, was Raif's 36th birthday, the 8th he has spent in prison, away from his wife and away from his 3 children. January 9th was the 5th anniversary of the day that Raif endured the first 50 of those 1,000 lashes. That the flogging has not continued is a small mercy, but the prolonged imprisonment in harsh conditions is taking a terrible physical and mental toll. The Saudi authorities must end this egregious injustice. Madam Speaker, I again demand the immediate and unconditional release of prisoner of conscience Raif Badawi. I renew my call for a halt to all weapons sales and military aid until the Saudi regime cleans up its human rights record, which is appalling. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Life is the most precious gift from God, from conception until natural death, and every moment in between. We must recognize, celebrate, and bear witness to the sanctity of life. Next Friday, tens of thousands of people from across the country will come to Washington and participate in the March for Life. This event serves as a clear reminder that preserving and protecting the lives of the most vulnerable is not simply an option, it's a mandate that we all must uphold. Madam Speaker, I refuse to stand idly by as the unborn are brazenly targeted. Amidst the shroud of rancor and divisiveness that hangs over this House at present, I will continue to fight for their right to life. They deserve nothing less than unwavering advocates. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my...
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor my constituent and friend, June Parkinson. June passed away on January 4th at the age of 64. June was a loving wife, a mother, a grandmother, a gifted artist, and a special education teacher, and a true community leader. She devoted her life in service of others, sharing her talents for the betterment of us all. June was a longtime committee person, member of the Greater Glenside Patriotic Association, and chairperson of the Glenside 4th of July Parade. The annual parade is the longest continuing Independence Parade in America and the pride of our hometown of Glenside. June made it her mission each year to ensure this treasured tradition continued.
She was an extraordinary activist, environmental activist, best remembered for spearheading the yearly Earth Day cleanup of Keswick Avenue. And even though June was born in Boston and was a Red Sox fan, all of us Philly fans of Glenside embraced and thanked her for her kind heart, her giving spirit, and her dedication to community. I join June's friends and family and the wider Glenside community in mourning her loss. I am thankful for June's example of quiet acts of service. I am better for having known June. Thank you. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize January as National Mentoring Month, when we volunteer our time to provide support and guidance for our nation's young people. They're better equipped to tackle personal and professional challenges. A good mentor could be a friend, a family member, a boss, or a school counselor. Effective counseling prior to graduation can assist students in making better informed decisions about their education options and career prospects. That is why Congressman Jim Langevin and I introduced the Counseling for Career Choice Act. Despite a great deal of money being invested to improve education, very little has been spent to address career development specifically. This bill authorizes a grant program to give states and local education agencies access to current counseling programs or the means to implement new counseling frameworks. Additionally, the bill provides resources to ensure counselors can support their students to the best of their abilities. When we equip students with the tools that they need to succeed, they embark on educational journeys that lead to rewarding careers. I'd like to encourage my colleagues to join Congressman Langevin and I in support of H.R. 5092, the Counseling for Career Choice Act. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Objection. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today for our nation's communities saddled with stranded nuclear waste stockpiles because the federal government has failed to meet its obligation to find a permanent repository. My constituents in Zion understand this all too well. After its nuclear plant closed in 1998, 2 million pounds of spent nuclear fuel remained. Literally sitting on the shores of Lake Michigan, more than 50 casts severely affect the quality of life of the residents of Zion. It deters economic investment, depresses home values, drives up property taxes, and stretches the city's already thin budget. So today, I am proud to reintroduce the Stranded Act to at last provide some compensation for these affected communities. Zion is not alone. Across the country, there are more than a dozen communities with nuclear plants at various stages of decommissioning, with more to come. I am grateful for the support and leadership of Appropriations Chairwoman Nita Lowey and Appropriations Subcommittee on Energy and Water Development Chairwoman Marcy Kaptur in reintroducing this bill. Together, we are fighting to make the federal government do right for communities like Zion. I urge my colleagues to join us, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the people of Louisiana recently lost a respected political leader, a businessman, a war veteran, and a civil rights leader, Mr. Willie Belton. Mr. Belton had a life of service to others. He was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart under fire heroically during the Korean War. He marched with Dr. Martin Luther King in Washington, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, and like Dr. King, Mr. Belton always advocated Christian values and nonviolent protest. He also led his local NAACP chapter in Louisiana, and in February 2019 was awarded the Louisiana Medal of Honor. Please join me in honoring his lifetime of service to Louisiana and a Louisiana treasure, Mr. Willie Belton, whose memory will fortunately live with us forever. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to congratulate Julie Bornstein on her retirement from the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition. For more than 30 years, Julie has worked tirelessly as an advocate for affordable housing throughout the Coachella Valley. She has dedicated her career to making a difference in the lives of thousands of individuals in Riverside and Imperial counties. Her leadership has been instrumental in raising awareness about the homelessness issue so many members of our communities face, and through her efforts we have seen an increase in the availability of affordable housing throughout the Inland Empire. Apart from her work in the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition, Julie served in the California State Assembly and was chosen to serve as chair of the Democratic Caucus. She then went on to serve as director of the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Later, Julie was appointed CEO and president of the Campaign for Affordable Housing. Julie's work has not gone unnoticed, and the Coachella Valley is a better place because of her. We wish you a happy retirement, Julie. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, today being his actual birthday, 1929, 91 years ago. Dr. King has become synonymous with the civil rights movement and the right to ensure each and every one of us are treated equally, regardless of our background and upbringing. His strong Christian beliefs helped him inspire positive social change through peaceful protests and demonstrations. In a nation plagued by identity politics, his pursuit of liberties is relevant now as it was during the 1960s. Dr. King demonstrated to a world that it is not the color of a person's skin that mattered, rather the nature of their character. Indeed, one of my favorite quotes and one to live by. The work of Dr. King is not yet done. He remains a shining example of the right way to lead, the right way to peacefully protest, and the right way to inspire. I look forward to joining with the celebration at the Southside Community Center in Oroville, California, this coming Monday, where his legacy is celebrated and even brought forward by scholarships for the young people that will be there. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor one of my heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., who was born on this day 91 years ago. Next Monday, the nation will pay tribute to this incredible man and his life, and as well as his enduring legacy, a legacy rooted in unconditional love. In these difficult and divided times, plagued by the rise of hate, I can't think of a better legacy to reflect upon as we embark upon this year. The road ahead will be difficult for our nation, but I'm encouraged by and find great hope in the following words once spoke by Dr. King. Quote, "We can no longer afford to worship the God of hate or bow before the altar of retaliation. The oceans of history are made turbulent by the ever-rising tides of hate. History is cluttered with the wreckage of nations and individuals that pursued this self-defeating path of hate. Love is the ultimate force that makes for the saving choice of life and good against the damning choice of death and evil. Therefore, the first hope in our inventory must be the hope that love is going to have the last word." I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. During the President's upcoming State of the Union address, he has the opportunity to deliver a strong message of unity, peace, and hope to all of those who tune in, both Americans and all who are watching abroad. Just in the last few months, we've seen that America is the beacon of hope for the people of Hong Kong and Taipei who are suffering under pressure from Beijing. We've seen that America is the lifeline for people in Beirut and Tehran who find themselves under the thumb of the Iranian regime. This is a critical moment in world history. People are looking to the United States and our president for leadership more than ever. And so I urge my colleagues in the majority party to refrain from the impeachment antics and charades. Don't be petty. Rise above your worst impulses and support our president. The world is watching. Thank you. I yield back.
Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut rise?
Madam Speaker, I rise to address the House and Essex and provide with my remarks.
Without objection, gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.J. Res. 76, a resolution of the disapproval of Secretary of Education's new borrower defense rule. This rule guts consumer protections for students and taxpayers and makes it more difficult for students to access relief for loans obtained for degrees that have no value. Over 1,200 students in Connecticut have been defrauded by predatory, for-profit colleges like Corinthian and ITT Tech and still await relief. The department has made the approval process more difficult, leaving hundreds of thousands of students desperately waiting for answers. Too many first-generation low-income students, student veterans, and students of color are lured into these fraudulent schools that prioritize profits over helping students advance their education. The DeVos rule eliminates automatic school closing discharges and weakens the early warning system that forces institutions to invest in the potential debt relief. And it puts a greater burden of proof on students, barring them from relief if they cannot file their claims fast enough. As a career educator who truly understands the equalizing power of education, I say it is unconscionable that Department of Education and the Secretary do not feel a moral imperative to protect students. I urge my colleagues to reject this resolution.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise? Without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in remembrance of the precious lives of Preston Cope and Bailey Holt, two victims of a tragic school shooting at Marshall County High School in Benton, Kentucky, 2 years ago. This tragic event devastated the Benton community and took 2 lives away from us far too soon. Preston and Bailey continue to be dearly missed by their families and the Marshall County community, which has shown incredible resilience in the face of trying circumstances. Preston Cope and Bailey Holt remain in our hearts and minds to this day. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 767, I now send to the desk a resolution anointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial of Donald John Trump, President of the United States, and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Chuck Todd.
And good day, everyone. We are coming back on the air from Washington on what is a very busy news day to bring you live coverage of the official House vote to send articles of impeachment against President Trump to the United States Senate for a trial. It's something that has happened only twice before in American history. This vote today will also approve the 7 House members that were named this morning by Speaker Nancy Pelosi as the official impeachment managers, or in essence, the prosecutors in this trial. Those managers or prosecutors will be led by the House Intelligence Committee Chairman, Adam Schiff. It was 4 weeks ago today that the House voted to impeach the president, and since then there has been near constant jockeying between Speaker Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell over how to conduct the trial, mostly over potential witnesses and what new evidence can make it into the trial. And by the way, speaking of new evidence, there was some that has surfaced that could have a huge impact on the trajectory of this trial. Let's go down to Casey Hunt. She's following all of this from Capitol Hill. So Casey, we know right now this is more of, we're going through this formal process, but walk us through Speaker Pelosi's decision-making process on the manager she picked and what she now expects this trial to look like through the lens of these managers.
Well, Chuck, this was a very deliberate set of people chosen by Nancy Pelosi, and there were a couple surprises on this team, but we do know that Adam Schiff is going to really be the leader and driver behind this. He is a very important figure. His legal background, a critical part of this, and we're hearing now on the floor from Jerry Nadler, who, of course, another top chairman here, Chuck. But this is really about the experience, the lawyer, the legal experience these people bring to the table.
Let's go, thank you, Casey. Let's go dip in and take a listen to Gerald Nadler right now, House Judiciary Committee Chairman.
He invited foreign interference into our elections. Again, he jeopardized our national security. He did all this for his personal political gain. And then he violated the Constitution by stonewalling Congress's efforts to investigate, ordering an absolute blockade of evidence. Despite that, the House was able to uncover powerful evidence that demonstrates beyond doubt the President's betrayal and violations of the Constitution. But we still have not heard the whole truth, because the President has refused to allow a single document to be turned over to the House in response to our impeachment subpoenas. And he has prevented us from hearing key witnesses as well. This is unprecedented. Our Speaker has led our fight for a fair trial in the Senate. Above all, a fair trial must include additional documents and all relevant witnesses. The American people have common sense. They know that any trial that does not allow witnesses is not a trial. It is a cover-up. The Speaker's insistence on this point has gotten results. Just yesterday, we received critical new evidence from the President's former associate, Lev Parnas, that further proves Mr. Trump's scheme to pressure Ukraine to go after his personal political opponents. New witness testimony has become available as well, including John Bolton's announcement that he would honor a Senate subpoena. Under today's resolution, the managers also have broad authority to submit to the Senate any additional evidence the House may acquire on its own, and we will do so. The Senate is on trial. We will see whether they conduct a fair trial and allow the witnesses or conduct a cover-up. Today's resolution is the next step in this serious and solemn constitutional process. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the resolution.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This impeachment process has been flawed from the outset. It resembles not a congressional action, it resembles more a Dr. Seuss book, knowing not which way it goes. On September 24th, the Speaker declared at a press conference the House was conducting an impeachment inquiry. However, to the contrary, to the Speaker's decree that we were all of a sudden in impeachment inquiry, the House did not authorize the impeachment inquiry until October 31st by adopting H.R. 660. It is just said just a moment ago that the Speaker has been leading the fight for a fair trial in the Senate. I wish the Speaker had been leading for a fair hearing in the House instead of trashing our rules. For those 71 out of 78 days from the time it was announced at a press conference to the time we finished, the President was not permitted to participate in these meetings. Think about that, 71 days out of 78 in which we actually did something on impeachment. He was not presented the ability to cross-examine fact witnesses, present counter-arguments, no due process at all in those 71 days. When presented with the opportunity when it came to the Judiciary Committee, instead of the Judiciary Committee stepping up and actually acting like the Judiciary Committee of the Committee of Impeachment, we punted. We had some law professors who already had their basic talking points. He could have cross-examined them. That would have done a lot of good. Then we could have had witnesses of staffers who testified. Again, a lot of good. Where were the fact witnesses? Instead of the rubber stamp that we were warned about 20 years ago by the current chairman, we became the rubber stamp. Democrats repeatedly violated House rules and blatantly abused the rules. They even wrote in H. 660, even to this day, we will pass this out in violation of H.R. 660. They used inflammatory rhetoric, haunting them because this is what they had to do. One Democrat said, I call for impeachment today because it's one heck of an emergency. Another said, we have a crime in progress. We have an emergency that our national election is going on right now. But my favorite in December, it's a crime spree in progress. Oh, the hyperbole just reeks in this room. When we understand this, if it was such an emergency, if there was in lieu to finding a 911 call, then why did we hold this for almost a month? Well, we've been told that it's to help a Senate fair trial. Be damned, the House inappropriate process we had. But even though the process was bad, I'm going to go back and make sure the facts are, let's make sure the facts are here, because they still haven't changed. A phone call that was put out in a transcript in which no pressure was applied. There was no conditionality on anything given in that call or sense to do that. There was also nothing given by the Ukrainians to actually get this money that was released, by the way, before it was actually a statutory deadline of September 31st. They did nothing. They got the money anyway. But the problem is they want the Senate to do their job for them. But that's not how it works. You see, the Speaker, and what I've heard today, even from folks giving 1 minute, Madam Speaker, is that this is all they wanted. It was a political impeachment. They have said he is impeached for life. This shows the true motivation, I believe, of the other side. It is their dislike for this president and the good work he is doing. So, Madam Speaker, before I reserve here for a moment, this has always been a political impeachment. Even today on the floor, the talk of the president being forever impeached and it's always being sustained forgets the Senate trial. I hope this ends this political impeachment and this body never sees it again. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished chairman of the Intelligence Committee, gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of the resolution. The task before us is a grave one, but one demanded by our oath. The impeachment inquiry undertaken by the House of Representatives found that President Donald J. Trump abused his power and sought to cover it up with an unprecedented campaign of obstruction. He withheld hundreds of millions of U.S. dollars in vital military aid to Ukraine, a close ally at war with Russia, and withheld a coveted White House meeting critical to the Ukrainian leader's international legitimacy until Ukraine would commit to help President Trump cheat in the next election. President Trump put his own personal interests above the national interests, above our national security, and if not stopped, he will do it again. For that reason, he was impeached, and for that reason, the House managers will take the case to the Senate and to the American people. Because the appropriate remedy, indeed the only remedy, is the conviction and removal from office of President Donald Trump. I yield back.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. McCarthy.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Back when this national nightmare began, Speaker Pelosi laid bare her intentions and purely partisan agenda. She told her caucus that they needed to strike while the iron is hot. This was always an exercise in raw partisan politics. Contrary to the warnings of our founders, and over the last month, we saw the justification for running the fastest, thinnest, and weakest impeachment in American history crumble. Instead of sending the articles of impeachment to the Senate for trial, Speaker Pelosi held them hostage in a failed play to gain leverage that she did not and would never have. In terms of concessions, she got nothing. No control, no moral victories. In other words, another failed strategy. After a month of counterproductive and harmful delays, I have 3 questions for my friends on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats. What happened to impeachment being urgent? What happened to Congress being on the clock? What happened to saying the House would be derelict in our duty if we did not act immediately? These were all the assertions Democrats made over the past several months. I guess it turns out none of them are true. These delay tactics were self-serving, hypocritical, and discrediting. But they made an important admission. Some might even call it a concession. You proved a very big point. Democrats do not even believe their case was robust enough to win in a trial. Even the Speaker's allies admit the delays undermined their case. Some has gone as far as describing it as a failed strategy. These are those who are closest to her. Senator Feinstein, the senior Democrat from our state of California and the hometown senator of the Speaker, said, "The longer it goes on, the less urgent it becomes." And Chairman Adam Smith, a confidant of the Speaker, said it was time to transmit the articles to the Senate. Before these statements were made last week, before the Speaker relented, they are significant because they were public and they were honest. I'm disappointed these individuals did not have the courage to stand by their initial comments. If impeachment was truly as urgent as Democrats claimed, the majority should not have waited for the Speaker to choose a political convenient time. Anyone could have recognized this ploy would not work. The House and the Senate are different institutions, and at this point in time, controlled by different parties. As James Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers, the purpose of bicameralism is to guard against the dangers of encroachment and to stop toxic resolutions from taking effect. We saw separation of powers prevail against an abuse of power. just as the Constitution intends. The idea of withholding a sloppy impeachment case to force the Senate to change its rules is constitutionally and politically unheard of. Frankly, it's just ridiculous. In Article 1, Section 5, the Constitution clearly states, each House may determine the roles of its proceedings. It doesn't say the House may determine the roles of proceedings in the Senate. If anything, the Speaker's actions have only further persuaded members of the Senate that the evidence of impeachment was neither thorough nor satisfactory. But you know what? Let's be honest. This was never about persuasion. It was never about the rule of law. It was what Alexander Hamilton warned us, that one party would get control. And just because of the animosity would demean the process of impeachment. And by selecting these particular batch of managers, the Speaker has further proven she's not interested in winning the minds, the hearts, or even following the Constitution. Let's take a look at the first three names Speaker Pelosi announced in her anticipated announcement earlier today. Chairman Schiff, a man who has already taken on the role of judge, jury, and fact witness throughout the entire House impeachment process. Chairman Nadler, someone who campaigned for the chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee that's responsible for impeachment beginning as far back as December 2017, before you were even in the majority, on the notion that he would be the best person to lead the charge on potential impeachment against the president. You see, you get a chairmanship by your conference voting for you. You campaign for it. You put your best ideas out there of why you should be the chairman. In 2017, that was the campaign. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, a member who almost 2 years to this date voted in support of impeachment. You know, that was more than a year before the Ukraine call even took place. Those are just some of the managers. If you think about the members, there's people who were, on the day they were sworn in to this body, told those who supported him the greatest that they were going to impeach him. As I've said in the past, there's an issue with fairness. But instead of looking to the Senate, Speaker Pelosi should be looking within her own caucus. From the beginning, this investigation was marred by selective leaks to the media, a completely predetermined process. Yes, we've been through impeachment before, but it was much different. We believed in the rule of law back then, that we would face our accuser, that you could cross-examine, that the minority could actually ask for witnesses. The day that impeachment was asked to come forward, I sent a letter to the Speaker, laying out 10 items, none that were made up. You know what they were? The fair process we've always used in the past. The answer was no. Because they've been working on this for 2.5 years, they could not let fairness determine the outcome. Any other prosecutor would be disbarred for such blatant bias, especially if that prosecutor was a fact witness in the case. The reason for this impeachment is the same reason it's taken Democrats 30 days to send the articles to the Senate. Just spite. They wanted to stain the president's record without giving him a fair chance to clear his name. Last year, we saw House Democrats invert the burden of proof during their fair investigation. For every American watching, take, for instance, if this was your government, if you switched the burden of proof on you. We have a congressman, Max Rose, characterized it this way, this new freshman of the majority. The president says he's innocent, so all we're saying is prove it. God forbid government accuses you of something as an average American to say you have to prove it. We just switched a fundamental belief as an American. But only in this house do we do that. This guilty and proven innocent mentality was an admission that impeachment was not about upholding justice or protecting the rule of law. Now Democrats have invented an even more destructive standard. You're guilty because they say so. Our founders feared this day. Alexander Hamilton warned us of this day. I had hoped this day would not come. I would hope those who uphold the Constitution would believe in the rule of law instead of the spite of the dislike of an individual. Like the kangaroo courts on college campuses, or an accusation is enough for a conviction. Even as early as just last Sunday in an interview, Speaker Pelosi made that point very clear to all of us. Asked what a Senate acquittal would mean, she said it didn't matter. The president is impeached forever. Is that what this is all about? Just a personality. Just an abuse of power that you have within a house that we all feared this country would never do. You could almost see on the speaker's smile as she spoke about this new standard how incredibly solemn she was. Madam Speaker, when Americans look back on this sad saga, they will see a rigged process that forever damaged the remedy of impeachment. Speaker Pelosi got nothing from the Senate, but the American people got worse than nothing. They got stuck with the bill for a costly, never-ending investigation. The old saying that you get what you pay for does not apply here. Congress wasted time and millions of dollars on partisan impeachment. In return, taxpayers get nothing. Democrats' misaligned priorities have cost the people solutions that could have improved the quality of their life. There's no greater contrast than what we are doing right here today than what is happening at Pennsylvania Avenue. The president sitting down with another country of a leader and signing a trade agreement. Something people said we could never get done. To make this country stronger, to make America the next century ours. But what are we doing here? We are doing what this majority has worked their entire time for. Before they were even sworn in, they campaigned for the position of chairman, for this moment, for this time, for the millions of dollars that are spent, so they could say the president is impeached. That's a lofty history. Those are lofty goals that you now have authored more subpoenas than you created laws. But thank God we got a president in the White House that does not sit back. Yes, he got the United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, our top two traders. He's sitting with a trade agreement with China today, but think about how much stronger his hand would have been had that agreement taken place earlier when he got it. No, it was held. Why? Because we were impeaching. That's an amazing agenda, but you promised people you would do it. This is not a moment this body should be proud of. If as Speaker Pelosi likes to say, impeachment is a national civics lesson, let's use this blunder as a teachable moment. I'll make this promise to the American public, because the day will come that the majority will switch. We will uphold the Constitution. We will listen to the words of Alexander Hamilton. And just because somebody else is in an office that we may not like, we will not change the rule of law. We'll not accuse them of breaking it and say they have to prove it. We believe America is more than a country. That America is an idea of the straightness that we, yes, would make students in Iran rise up for the freedom of what they know America to be. That the rule of law was so powerful. This is a moment in a civic lesson that we should learn. This is a moment that will teach our grandchildren that, yes, more than 200 years ago, the founders crafted an amazing country, but they warned us what abuse of power would look like. The sad part is we're witnessing it. What a contrast in a day and time. Moving forward, We must not redo these same mistakes in Congress. And my promise to you, if power was to change, the rule of law would come back. We'd have an agenda focused on people, not on politics. We'd have a voice that you're innocent until proven guilty. We would not abuse our power just for the sheer shake of politics to say you're impeached forever because I dislike you. We are better than this. It's a sad day. But the great thing about America, it will all change because the people have the voice. I yield back.
Members are once again reminded to address their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, 2 points. First, my colleagues in the minority would rather talk about anything than try to defend what President Trump actually did, because they can't. There is overwhelming evidence that the president pressured the Ukrainian government to interfere in our election on his behalf. Then he covered it up. These are high crimes and misdemeanors, and we will prove that in the Senate. Second, our minority colleagues don't like our ongoing fight for a fair trial because it got results. New documents and additional witnesses have emerged that unmistakably point to the president's guilt, and we have exposed the efforts of some in the Senate majority to put on a sham trial. The American people understand that a trial without evidence, without witnesses, is no trial at all, but a cover-up, and that will not stand. We must protect the Constitution and the integrity of our elections. That is what this is about. We must remove this president to protect our country. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Georgia has 30 seconds remaining. Gentleman from New York has 1 minute remaining, and the gentleman from New York has the right to close. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
And I appreciate that, Madam Speaker. Is the gentleman from New York ready to close?
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
There's no other speakers. Our closing is no other speakers.
I have one more speaker.
And you're not ready to close. I reserve.
No.
No, the gentleman's incorrect. The gentleman from New York has one remaining speaker who will close. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
I will take it back. Give me the time one more time, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Georgia has 30 seconds remaining. The gentleman from New York has 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for your
You're welcome.
Work. Look, there are 2 facts that just came out right here, and again, we're going to hear in just a moment, but there are facts. Undoubtedly, the mics are not working on the other side, majority side. We've talked about the facts. There is not overwhelming evidence. We've discussed this over and over and over till we're blue in the face, but it doesn't matter because this is a political impeachment. This has nothing to do with the facts. We've shown that there was nothing done wrong, but that does not matter. When the train is on the tracks, the whistle is blowing, impeachment matters, and the only thing that matters on a time where the only real emergency here is that there's a 2020 election in which the Democrats can't stand to see the fact this president is going to win again. They can't stand the fact of who they've got running. So what do? We impeach him, as they said, for life. That's wrong.
Gentleman's
Vote no.
time's
I yield
expired.
back.
Gentleman from New York.
Again, no defense. I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished Speaker of the House, the gentlelady from California, Ms.
Gentlelady is
Pelosi.
recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and for his exceptional custodianship of the Constitution of the United States. For 13 years, the top Democrat on the Constitution and Civil Liberties Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee. And thank you for your leadership in protecting and defending the Constitution, the oath that we take as members of Congress. As I enter into the conversation, I do want to thank the distinguished gentleman from Georgia for his apology for his ridiculous remarks about me and House Democrats. Thank you. We accept your apology, Mr. Collins. Now I want to go to the purpose of why we're on the floor today. My colleagues on both sides of the aisle, we are here today to cross a very important threshold in American history. On December 18th, the House of Representatives passed articles of impeachment of Donald Trump, articles of impeachment for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. By his own admission, the president stated that, yes, he had had that conversation with the president of Ukraine, but he didn't see anything wrong with it. Well, we don't agree with that assessment. And yes, it is a fact. When someone is impeached, they are always impeached. It cannot be erased. So I stand by that comment, although I know you don't like hearing it. I stand by this American flag, picture of the American flag, as I did the day that we introduced the articles of impeachment onto the floor. Because every day, all over America, in classrooms as well as courtrooms, and in this Congress of the United States when we meet, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. And to the republic for which it stands. That is what our nation is. That is the genius, the beautiful, exquisite genius of the Constitution, of that we are a republic. That was the decision of our founders, their vision. They didn't want a monarchy. They wanted a republic. And when Benjamin Franklin came out of Independence Hall and was asked, what do we have, Mr. Franklin, a monarchy or a republic? He said, a republic, if we can keep it. I often wondered why he said that, why that would be in doubt. But we see why it is in doubt right now, when the President of the United States has said, Article 2 says, I can do whatever I want. That's a monarchy. That is not a republic that we pledge our allegiance to every single day. And so here we are today with the articles of impeachment about to be transmitted to the United States Senate. I was thinking this morning and mentioned in a previous public event the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. Listen, my children, and you will hear of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. Well, listen, my children, you will hear about an assault on the Constitution of the United States, undermining the republic for which our flag stands, by the President of the United States. The President of the United States, in using appropriated funds enacted in a bipartisan way by this Congress, funds that were meant to help the Ukraine fight the Russians. The President considered that his private ATM machine, I guess, and said he could say to the President, he could make, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Do you paint houses too? What is this? Do me a favor. So we have a situation that is very sad. Don't talk to me about my timing. For a long time, I resisted the calls from across the country for impeachment of the president for obvious violations of the Constitution that he had committed. But recognizing the divisiveness of impeachment, I held back. Frankly, I said, this president isn't worth it. But when he acted the way he did in relationship to withholding funds from Ukraine in return for a benefit to him that was personal and political, he crossed a threshold. He gave us no choice. He gave us no choice. So children, our Constitution is the vision of our founders. They were so brave. They declared independence. They did in a time frame when in the course of human events it becomes necessary. They declared independence. They fought a war of independence and bravely succeeded. They wrote documents, our founding documents, the Constitution. Thank God they made it amendable so that we could ever be expanding freedom in our country. And that, my children, is what you pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic contained in that Constitution of the United States. So we take that oath. And when we become members of Congress or other public office, we take an oath to protect and defend that Constitution of the United States. And the President of the United States takes an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, an oath that he has blatantly violated. And for this reason, he was impeached by the House of Representatives. And for this reason, we thought it would be helpful to have not only the strong case for impeachment and removal that was put forth in this House, but to know that more was to come. And we didn't make it come because we said we're going to wait until after Christmas to send this over. They would like to have had us sent it over on Christmas Eve so they could dismiss it. Perhaps they don't realize that dismissal is cover-up, but that has been one of their trains of thought. Dismissal is cover-up. I was so disappointed the other day, last Friday, I guess Thursday, when the leader of the United States Senate, rather than strengthening the institution in which he serves, became subservient and said and signed on to a resolution that would dismiss charges. Dismiss. Dismissal is cover-up. And so in the course of the time since we passed the resolution, and not because of the time, we passed it on December 18th. On December 20th, new emails show that 91 minutes after Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president, a top Office of Management Budget Aid asked the Department of Defense to hold off on sending military aid to Ukraine. On December 29th, revelations emerged of the OMB director and acting chief of staff Mulvaney's role in the delay of aid, the effort by lawyers in the administration to justify the delay, and the alarm, most importantly, the alarm that in the administration that delay caused within the administration. On January 2nd, newly unredacted Pentagon emails, which the House subpoenaed and the president blocked, raised serious concerns by the Trump administration officials about the legality of the president's hold on the aid to Ukraine. On January 6th, former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton said he would comply with the subpoena compelling his testimony. His lawyers stated he had new relevant information. On January 13th, reports emerged that the Russian government hacked the Ukrainian gas company Burisma as part of their ongoing effort to influence the U.S. election in support of Trump. On yesterday, House committees, Mr. Nadler, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Engel, and Congresswoman Maloney, Madam Chair Maloney, released new evidence pursuant to a House subpoena from Lev Parnas, recently photographed with the Republican leader, an associate of Rudy Giuliani, that further proves that the president was the central player in the scheme to pressure Ukraine for his own benefit in the 2020 election. The Senate leader and the president are afraid of more facts coming to light. That is why the leader signed onto that dismissal resolution. A dismissal, again, is a cover-up. The American people will fully understand the Senate's move to begin the trial without witnesses and documents as a pure political cover-up. Whatever the outcome, the American people want a fair trial, fair to the president, fair to the American people. The American people deserve the truth. The Constitution requires a trial, a fair trial. The GOP Senate behaved. The American people, okay, let me just make this briefer. The House is now moving forward with a vote to transmit the articles and appoint managers. As Speaker, I am proud to appoint outstanding American patriots to serve on the impeachment panel. Chairman Schiff, Chairman Nadler, Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren. This is her third impeachment as a staffer to a House Judiciary Committee member in the Nixon impeachment, as a member of the Judiciary Committee on the Clinton, and now as a House manager, Madam Chair. Madam Chair of our caucus, Hakeem Jeffries, a serious, respected litigator. Val Demings, a member of the police force of Orlando, and for 27 years, and for part of that time, the first woman and African-American police chief of Orlando. She knows her way around the courtroom. Jason Crow from Colorado, an Army Ranger, served our country in the military in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now in the Congress of the United States, and he too, a respected litigator. And Sylvia Garcia of Texas, a judge in a number of capacities in Texas and a member of the Judiciary Committee. We're very honored that you have taken the responsibility, all of you, to bring the articles of impeachment over to the United States Senate with a case for the Constitution, a case for the Constitution. So back to the children, back to the children. We don't want this president or any president to ever violate the Constitution. It is very, very important that we see that that Constitution is central to who we are as a country. Our system of government, our Constitution, so valued, so respected, hopefully so honored by everyone who takes an oath of office to support and defend it. And when you see the Russians now hacking in Ukraine, it just came out yesterday or the day before, it just reminds me that I think most Americans would think that voters in America should decide who our president is, not Vladimir Putin in Russia deciding who our president is. I'm very concerned that in all of this, whether it's withholding funds for the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian government to fight the Russians, whether it's undermining our commitment to NATO, whether it's, again, making decisions of what happens in Syria vis-a-vis Turkey, favoring the Russians, that all roads lead to Russia. All roads lead to Putin. Well, some in the administration may think that's okay. I don't. But we do insist and wonder why this president and some in this Congress will not come to the defense of our electoral system by allowing that to happen, denying that it's happening, placing the blame elsewhere. This is as serious as it gets for any of us. Only the vote to declare war would be something more serious than this. We take it very seriously. It's not personal, it's not political, it's not partisan, it's patriotic. So again, I thank our distinguished managers for their courage, their dedication, for being willing to spend the time to do the job, to honor the oath that we take, and honor the pledge that our children take, allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands. With that, I urge a yes vote and yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 767, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Gentleman from Georgia.
I ask for a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman ask for the yeas and nays?
Yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on adoption of the resolution will be followed by a 5-minute vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, if ordered. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The vote itself will be to formally approve the House managers and send over those articles to the Senate. It is pretty much a foregone conclusion there, obviously. Let me go down to Casey Hunt on Capitol Hill. So, Casey, walk me through the rest of the day. There's oddly some formality to this, and I say this because I sometimes think it's odd when we choose to follow some formality that's only been done twice.
Indeed, Chuck, but the formality in this case is very clearly and carefully laid out. It's a 100-plus page document in the Senate in total for their impeachment rules. And this particular piece of it is really a day of choreography. And actually where I'm standing right now in this hallway, the chamber of the House of Representatives to my right, if you were to keep going to my left, you would end up in the Senate. This is where those articles of impeachment are actually going to be walked by the managers. So today is the day that the House will notify the Senate that these articles have passed once this official resolution does pass on the House floor as we expect it to. Nancy Pelosi will have to sign that. There will be a formal ceremony for her to do that, and then you will see them walk across, and they're going to replace the cameras that we're using now with ones that everyone can access, and you will see that they'll actually put them in a box and walk them down across the way and hand them over to the Senate. And there'll still be much pomp and circumstance that will still have to go on again tomorrow to actually finalize this procedure. The Senate will acknowledge that they have received these articles, but they will still have to be read formally on the Senate floor. None of that is going to happen until tomorrow, Chuck.
Thank you, Casey Hunt. I did want people to understand there really is a lot of choreography. And tomorrow, she mentioned, there'll be more in the Senate. We'll have the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court showing up as well. But let me go over to the White House. We know who's prosecuting the case. Hallie Jackson, our chief White House correspondent. The president's defense team, we've had hints of who could be on it. We still don't know if it's a complete team, but we seem to have an idea of who will become familiar faces to the American public during this Senate trial. Who do we got?
Yeah, one's a name you probably don't know, Chuck. A lot of folks may not. One's a name folks may know. And we're talking about White House counsel Pat Cipollone. He is going to take the lead, just as Adam Schiff on the House Democratic side is taking the lead for the prosecution, if you will, in the president's defense. He is the White House counsel, joined up just about a year and a half ago, and has been critical in the management of this impeachment process since it started. He is, by all accounts, low-key, deferential to the president. He has earned the respect and is well-liked by President Trump, which is partly an indication of why you see him in this role, but he is not a high-profile figure here. The other person is Jay Sekulow. He is somebody who, if you have a TV or a radio, you may have heard him or seen him. He is a public figure. He is the president's personal attorney. He's also known for his work on religious liberties cases. He's argued in front of the Supreme Court. He is used to those highlights. The president himself, Chuck, knows that this vote is happening and had been happening. He, as we speak, is back in the White House behind me in the East Room for the Phase 1 of this trade agreement signing with China. This is a seminal moment for President Trump. That is how his advisors have framed it. But the president, in roughly a 30-minute tee-up to the meat of his remarks, thanked various people in the room and specifically told Republicans if they needed to go out for a vote on what he called the impeachment hoax happening now, that they could go ahead and do that, Chuck.
Very interesting. Always a bit on his mind there. A lot more questions, by the way, about the China trade deal than answers in what's been released so far from the White House. We'll set that aside. Let me go to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pete Williams, because the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has a very defined role in this trial. But I want to emphasize very defined role. There is actually limitations to what his role is. Pete, outline it, and we are going to see him, I believe, as soon as tomorrow in some of these formalities.
He'll be following the Senate rules largely, but it's the Constitution, Article 1, that says when there's a Senate trial for a president on impeachment, the Chief Justice shall preside. That's the key word, preside. But beyond that, the Constitution says nothing. It's the Senate rules that say what he'll do. And I think it's important to think that, you know, you'll see him sitting up there in the Speaker's or the normal President of the Senate's desk, but he'll really be more like a master of ceremonies than a trial judge, because while he does, under the rules, have the right to rule on admissibility of evidence and so forth, any ruling he makes can immediately be subject to a Senate vote. One senator just has to say, I want to vote. There's no debate, and they vote. So the Chief Justice understands that his authority is severely limited, that the Senate has the last word. Now, when William Rehnquist presided over the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton, he did not really make very many substantive rulings, but in a way, the rules had already been cooked. Robert's big challenge here is going to be that the House or the Senate Republican and Democratic leaders still haven't agreed on the rules, still haven't agreed on, for example, whether there'll be witnesses, Chuck.
Very quickly, William Rehnquist, the late Chief Justice, designed a special robe that was a Chief Justice robe, but I believe he debuted it at the Clinton impeachment trial. Does that robe still exist for a Chief Justice? Yeah.
Well, he actually debuted it in the Supreme Court. We all walked in one day, and there it was. He had put 4 gold stripes on his sleeve after seeing a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. But he did wear it to the impeachment, but you won't see that on John Roberts.
All right. I appreciate that, Pete. It's one of my interesting memories from 20-odd years ago. Let me go to Carol Lamb. She's an NBC News legal analyst, a former federal prosecutor. I have a very direct question for you. You're a prosecutor. You've got your indictments. The trial is you're preparing for a trial, and the day before the trial, you get all this new evidence. What do? That's in some ways what the House impeachment managers have staring in front of them within days of starting this trial.
Sure, and in this case, it's a big bonus for the House impeachment managers. As this debate has gone on about whether it was a positive or a negative thing for Nancy Pelosi to hold the articles of impeachment until now, in this sense, it's been a positive. For a defense attorney, your worst nightmare is that new evidence comes to light when you've already gone out with your defense themes. And in this case, what happened in this delay is there was a reaction to the impeachment. And, defense attorneys are used to saying, OK, this is the prosecution's case. And now, we're looking at the hand we've been dealt, and we're going to come up with an alternative story that takes into account the evidence that we see here and also exploits the vulnerabilities in that evidence. And so they have made their statements. The president has said, well, I said we, not I. You have to do us a favor instead of saying you have to do me a favor. So they've said these things. And now new evidence is coming to light in little dribs and drabs. And it was quite a powerful bunch of evidence that came out yesterday. And if that continues to happen, it affects the credibility of not just the president, but his entire defense team as well.
And certainly introduces a little more drama to what everybody thought was going to be a fairly predictable trial, if you can say an impeachment trial is predictable. Carol, thanks very much. Let me bring in here our own NBC News presidential historian, Michael Beschloss. Michael, I'm here with Andrea Mitchell. We want to wrap things up here. First of all, Michael, I got to ask you, I find it odd that we're deciding to go through this choreography over the next 48 hours on this process, only because we've done it it's been so infrequent. Why does that choreography matter? But as a historian, I'm sure part of you appreciates it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think another thing that's appreciated is the fact that the point is being made that this is such a rare event in American history. As you have said, this is going to be only the third Senate trial in 240 plus years, plus something we have not seen before, which is a trial of a president who's running for re-election in less than 10 months. Never seen that before. And, sometimes historians are able to see certain things that others cannot see in real time. We will know, at least a month from now, whether it was a good idea for Nancy Pelosi to delay the transmittal of those articles over these last 4 weeks.
And Andrea Mitchell, all of this is the backdrop to a presidential campaign that is trying to go into fifth gear.
I know, and debates are overshadowed by impeachment. Iowa is going to be overshadowed by...
A China trade deal is overshadowed by impeachment.
The State of the Union is going to come once again in the middle of an impeachment Senate trial, we do believe, as it did with Bill Clinton, but not in an election year. That is the big difference this time, and it is extraordinary. We're deciding on a presidential election when the President of the United States is under impeachment.
We are asking a lot of you, the American citizenry, that's for sure. It's all in, we got a long way to go. That concludes this part of our coverage today, but we will be back on the air at about 5 Eastern time to bring you, as we were talking about, the formal delivery of the articles of impeachment from the House to the Senate on what is a history-making day. Until then, I'm Chuck Todd. For all of my colleagues around New York and Washington, thank you. Good day for now.
On this vote, the yeas are 228, the nays are 193. The resolution is adopted, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved. For what purpose is the gentleman from New York
I
rise?
ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, Madam, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on January 15, 2020 at 11:18 a.m. that the Senate passed Senate 2547. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Cheryl L. Johnson.
Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, Madam, I write to respectfully tender my resignation as a member of the Committee on Financial Services. It has been an honor to serve in this capacity. Signed sincerely, Representative Peter T. King, Member of Congress.
Objection, the resignation is accepted. Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, Madam, I write to respectfully tender my resignation as a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security. It has been an honor to serve in this capacity. Signed, Van Taylor, Member of Congress.
Without objection, the resignation is accepted. The House Chair will lay before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, Madam, I write to respectfully tender my resignation as a member of the House Committee on Education and Labor. It has been an honor to serve in this capacity. Signed, Van Taylor, Member of Congress.
Without objection, the resignation is accepted. The House will come to order. What purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 1230, the Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act.
Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to House Resolution 790 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 1230. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
Read the post pages all the way down. The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 1230, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to amend the Age Discrimination and Employment Act of 1967 and other laws to clarify appropriate standards for federal employment discrimination and retaliation claims and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read for the first time. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking member. minority member of the Committee on Education and Labor. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, each will control 30 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I rise today in support of H.R. 1230, the Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act, or PWADA. I want to thank my colleagues, particularly the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Sensenbrenner, for working to pass this bipartisan proposal to restore workplace protections for older workers. In 1967, Congress passed the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, or ADEA, which recognizes the federal government's role in preventing older workers from being forced out of jobs or denied work opportunities because of their age. Importantly, the ADEA was enforced using an evidentiary standard that gave older workers a fair shot at holding employers accountable for age discrimination. Under this standard, workers seeking to challenge age discrimination in employment only had to prove that age was a motivating factor or one of many motivating factors behind an employer's discriminatory action. For decades, this mixed motive standard was consistent with the evidentiary standard in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which covers claims of unlawful discrimination on the basis of race, sex, national origin, or religion. Unfortunately, in 2009, in Gross v. FBL Financial Services, the Supreme Court upended decades of precedent, significantly raising the burden of proof for older workers. In its 5-4 decision, the court held that plaintiffs must prove that age was the decisive and
Gentleman is correct. The committee will be in order. Committee will be in order.
Thank you.
Members, if you can't having a conversation, please carry it off the floor. The member can proceed. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In its 5-4 decision, the court held that plaintiffs must prove that age was the decisive and determinative motivating factor for the employer's conduct. Under this altered framework, older workers cannot prevail unless they can show that the adverse action would not have occurred but for the employer's age. This higher threshold not only makes it harder for workers who have suffered this higher standard not only makes it harder for workers who have suffered discrimination to achieve redress, it also sends a message to employers that they need not treat age discrimination as seriously as other forms of discrimination. By amending the ADEA to clarify that the mixed motive standard is the evidence standard for evaluating claims, the Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act would restore workers' protections and reestablish a consistent burden of proof for claims alleging discrimination on the basis of age. The 2009 Gross decision also opened the door for the courts to apply the but-for standard to other civil rights laws, including Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the anti-retaliation provisions of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The bill before us clarifies that the mixed motive standard also applies to those 3 civil rights acts as well. Despite the bipartisan support in both chambers for this bill, I'm disappointed that the White House has already threatened a veto of this legislation. In reality, the administration has a troubling pattern of blocking legislation to help the very forgotten workers it promised to support. In addition to this legislation, the administration has placed veto threats on the Raise the Wage Act, which would gradually increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025, the Workplace Violence Protection, the Workplace Violence Prevention for Healthcare and Social Service Workers Act, which would support the safety of healthcare and social service workers. Today, the House has a chance to be on record and stand up for the average American worker, and I urge a yes vote on the Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Virginia for yielding. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to H.R. 1230, the Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act. Let me be clear. Every worker, including older workers, should be protected from workplace discrimination at his or her job. This is why Congress has passed a number of laws to protect Americans of all ages against discrimination in the workplace. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, CRA, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967, ADEA, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Rehab Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, ADA, makes employment discrimination because of an individual's race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or disability unlawful. Although I appreciate the stated purpose behind H.R. 1230, the rushed approach taken by committee Democrats and the lack of evidence and data to prove that this legislation is needed has led to a seriously flawed bill. Careful examination and scrutiny of any legislative proposal is necessary to determine whether it is needed and whether it appropriately and effectively addresses the relevant issues. Unfortunately, in developing H.R. 1230, the committee majority failed miserably in this regard. Committee Democrats chose not to hold a single hearing solely dedicated to examining either age discrimination or H.R. 1230. Rather, they examined this bill during a hearing that covered multiple topics and several other pieces of legislation completely unrelated to the bill.
Committee will be in order. Members, please carry your conversations off the floor. Gentlewoman from North Carolina will proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've seen many times during the 116th Congress with other legislation, H.R. 1230 was rushed through the Education and Labor Committee without necessary examination, discussion, or consideration. As a result, we're here debating yet another one-size-fits-all, quote, government knows best, end quote, mandate that rewards special interest and disregards real-world workplace experience and decades of Supreme Court precedent. However, the flawed process is far from the only issue with this legislation. The committee also has no evidence or data indicating this bill is necessary. In fact, the lone Democrat invited witness who testified on H.R. 1230 at a committee hearing covering many bills and topics admitted the impact of the Supreme Court's 2009 decision in Gross versus FBL Financial Services, Inc. is unknown, and she also admitted there's no data indicating workers have been discouraged from filing age discrimination charges with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, or bringing cases. The data simply does not indicate workers have been discouraged from filing discrimination or retaliation charges with the EEOC. Additionally, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment numbers for older workers have trended upwards in recent decades. In 2018, older workers earned 7% more than the median for all workers, a large increase from 20 years ago. For workers aged 65 and older, employment tripled from 1988 to 2018, while employment among younger workers grew by about a third. Likewise, over the past 20 years, the number of older workers on full-time work schedules grew 2.5 times faster than the number working part-time. Rather than considering misguided proposals such as H.R. 1230, which furthers government intervention, we ought to be empowering all workers, including older workers, to continue participating and thriving in America's workforce, to build upon, not stifle these impressive trends. Unfortunately, H.R. 1230 does the opposite. This legislation will actually harm older workers while simultaneously enriching trial lawyers. H.R. 1230 overturns Supreme Court precedent by allowing a plaintiff to argue that age was only a motivating, not decisive factor that led to an employer's unfavorable employment action, and it allows these kinds of mixed motive claims across 4 completely different non-discrimination laws. Moreover, allowing mixed motive claims in cases alleging retaliation puts employers in an untenable position of trying to prove that a legitimate employment decision was not in response to a prior complaint. The only party who will be paid in nearly all mixed motive cases is the plaintiff's attorney, because most employers will be able to demonstrate that they would have taken the same action in the absence of the impermissible motivating factor. So the very people this legislation is intended to help will not receive any monetary damages under H.R. 1230. H.R. 1230 will also increase frivolous legal claims against business owners. Such undeserving claims will take valuable resources away from efforts to prevent workplace harassment and discrimination. Finally, committee Republicans offered amendments to advance important priorities and practical solutions for older workers and highlight fundamental flaws in H.R. 1230. Unfortunately, our common sense amendments were defeated on a party line vote in committee. Mr. Chairman, all workers should be protected from workplace discrimination. But by rushing today's legislation to the House floor in an attempt to make up for an abysmal first year in the majority, Democrats have failed older workers. I encourage my colleagues to vote no on H.R. 1230, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman, Mr. Scott from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume just to respond to the idea that this has been rushed. There have been several